It is 12:34. You are listening to the mid-morning talk on Salam Media. And many of us tend to bottle up difficult emotions, grief, sadness, anxiety, depression, addiction, unhealthy obsessions, anger. We hide them in the basement of our minds and continue living under the pretense that they are gone. These bottled up emotions grow bigger over time and start manifesting in our daily thoughts and behaviors. There's much to discuss when it comes to emotional healing and trauma. And during the course of this month, we will be tackling trauma and healing and the healing process. And to tell us more is psychologist Mohammed Bhamjee. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Mohammed. Shukran for joining me.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's good to see you again, Maria.
Alhamdulillah, likewise. Now, Mohammed, when we're talking about, we're going to be talking about trauma a little, but before we get to trauma, what is emotional healing? If you can just quickly give us some background information.
So to sum it up, in a really like short understanding, it's basically to acknowledge different events that have happened to us in our lives, and these events sometimes prevent us from actually achieving our full potential or achieving results that we wanted to achieve and so forth. So it's anything that can that can hinder us from achieving results, but it's most importantly, we need to acknowledge it. So that's where the emotional healing comes in.
Mm-hmm. And what is a trauma all about, and how do we define trauma? Because when we think about trauma, we don't really understand trauma and how it can affect our lives.
So trauma is an emotional response to a sudden, unexpected event that can affect us directly or indirectly. And these events, therefore, have an influence on our physical and emotional safety. And in all honesty, most of us actually do experience some sort of trauma in our lives, and the body will respond to that emotionally, physically, and even neurologically. So yeah, that's again in a nutshell what trauma is and what it actually affects.
Now, what does trauma do to a person?
So look, again, like trauma is it's a broad topic that we're looking at, and everyone faces trauma differently, different events and so forth. But I think before understanding let's look at what it actually does. Neurologically, it's going to affect the different hormones and neurotransmitters that are released. In turn, it's going to affect the way you think, feel, and behave. And obviously, if you aren't thinking at an optimal level, you're not going to feel good. And if you aren't feeling really good, then the way that you behave isn't going to be adequate in terms of your work, personal issues, society. So your whole environment will actually be hindered in a way. And I think it's important to also understand that, as I said, that different people face trauma differently. So you'll have also symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression. But, initially, you won't simply just say, oh, you know what, you're in the traumatic event and, okay, now I'm experiencing trauma. It isn't like that, because remember, our bodies are actually built and designed to adjust. And, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. It's so amazing the way that the brain is actually wired. And there's different responses. So you have like the flight or fright response where adrenaline is released, and so in that moment, what happens is our body actually adjusts to the situation. And think of it where a thief comes and they want to rob you. Sometimes you do things that you wouldn't expect you would have done if you were in your right sense of mind, so to say, in inverted commas. But after that event, you just say you were in the event where a thief came and they tried to do something, and you responded maybe by trying to attack him, and you discovered you've got so much of strength that you never knew that you had that strength. And what happens is you just say you got hurt in the process, but you never felt that you actually got hurt. But later on, you're like, oh goodness, what happened? And then you realize, oh, I was actually in a fight with this thief, and this is what happened. So in that moment, as I said, the body adjusted to the environment that you were in. But when everything was returning to an equilibrium or to its normal state, as we'd say, that's when you realize, what this has been a traumatic event. And that's when things start happening where you might be replaying the event and so forth. And then that moves over to the symptoms of trauma that people experience.
Mm-hmm. So, the symptoms of trauma, would it be different for each individual, or are there main symptoms that we should look out for?
So again, it's really context specific. Like as I like to say, like no two fingers are the same. But there
Mm-hmm.
are similarities that would be across the boards, and I think we can't look for specific trauma symptoms, but if it's a symptom of trauma, it would be there. So it's not to say that I would experience completely different symptoms as compared to the next person. But to touch on the symptoms, like some people might feel numb, confused, anxious, agitated. They're unable to even feel the emotion, hyper arousal, exhausted. And people who actually experience trauma sometimes report that it's like a roller coaster, and they don't know what they're actually feeling. So as I said, some people actually know, what, I'm not feeling too well, and this is what's going on, while other people don't really know. So then it boils down to the person's emotional state as well, along with their self-awareness and how they deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is it important to heal from difficult situations that could negatively impact our emotions and, perhaps put us at a standstill that we cannot move forward because of the traumatic experiences that occurred?
Mhm. So I think that when you leave something too long, then you will obviously see the effects of the aftermath later on. And that aftermath is actually where a lot of harm can come in. So I'd like to use the analogy or the metaphor of having a bottle. It's a common one that most people have actually heard. When you have a bottle and you're continuously filling water in all the time, eventually that bottle is going to get full. And when that bottle gets full, it tends to overflow. And when it overflows, you don't know what to do and you don't know how to control it. So that's what trauma can actually do. So just like that, when you leave things too long, it's going to have a negative effect on you. And that negative effect will then, as I said, it will have an influence on the way you think, the way you feel, the way you behave. And if you leave trauma too long, it can actually lead to PTSD. And PTSD is another topic that's extremely lengthy, and it could go, we need an entire show for that. But it affects the biochemistry of the brain. It has a significant impact on the brain, where your relationships will be compromised or can be compromised. Your environment that you work in, your even sometimes you'll just be thinking, just be sitting and thinking, and you'll be like, what's going on? You don't know what's going on, and you don't know how to cope. You won't know how to deal with things. You don't know how to feel, how to approach different people, and so forth. So I think it then boils down to, again, the symptoms. The symptoms then are kind of intensified, but life carries on. Every day something new is there, and no one would just say, this person, unfortunately, is like that. People won't just say, this person is going through a traumatic event or experience, so we need to stop what we are doing. The world carries on, and as the world carries on, so does our stresses, our environmental stresses, from family, work, friends, whatever it might be. So everything else carries on, and it just gets added to our daily lives, and that's when the symptoms actually get intensified.
Mhm. Now, when it comes to the issue like PTSD, is there a cure for such, or does it take a lot of therapy to get through PTSD and any other traumatic experiences?
So there would be, the common thing is we tend to teach or educate our clients and our patients that whatever it is, you have to learn how to manage it. So some people would say, they completely cured from it, again, in inverted commas. But I guess when you're in a similar situation, memories will come up again, and it's important to understand the situation that you're in, what's going through, and how you react. So the main thing is that it's not like a simple fix where people can come in for 1-2 therapeutic sessions and everything's going to be all well and good after that. It's a lengthy process, and as I said, so the longer you're going to leave your trauma to manifest within yourself, sometimes the therapy can be a lengthier journey and more challenging. Again, each individual is different, but it's important to know that it's not going to just you're not going to be optimal within 1-2 sessions. And different therapeutic modalities work differently depending on the therapist. Some people use psychoanalytic therapy, some people use psychodynamic therapy, some people use cognitive behavioral therapy, and the list goes on. I guess it just depends on the therapist as well as the client. So it's a two-way relationship between the therapist and the client, and it all depends what the therapist does and how the therapist actually handles the client along with the cooperation and the collaboration of the client themselves. So you must remember that if for anything to work, I mean, it takes two hands to clap. You can't blame the psychologist only for saying, I'm not cured because of the psychologist. You have to also work and put in the effort to heal. And the first step comes from acknowledging it and understanding, I've been through something and I need help. And from there, you can actually take it further.
All right, so Mohammed, we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, I'd like to know more about how can parents recognize trauma in their children so that they can get the help for them. Please stay with us. We will be right back.
You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Africa. As the crisis in Palestine continues, the Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground facilitating emergency food and medical assistance to the affected families. Donate 15,000 rand or any amount and help the people of Palestine. Call AMA now on 083-251-9376 or donate online at Africa Muslims Agency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media, and today we are talking about trauma and healing, the healing processes, which we will be discussing during the course of this month, Women's Month, and, the healing processes, how to heal, etc. So we started with trauma, and still with me is Psychologist Mohammed Bhamjee. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section or send them to us on WhatsApp. The number is 061-766-0355. Mohammed, shukran for staying with us. Before the break, how can parents recognize trauma in their children so that they can get the help for them? We might just look at it as, no, they're just kids being kids, or kids are just being naughty, etc. And we don't realize that it is actually trauma.
So I think the first and most important thing is that parents need to communicate with their kids. The first step is the communication aspect in terms of knowing your child. Remember, if something is wrong, a child a child should have the ability and the opportunity to, well, not always the ability, but the opportunity to come and tell their parents, you know what, mom, dad, this is what I'm going through. They must be able to speak to them. So number one, parents need to establish that relationship between their kids. And it's really unfortunate that within various cultures, especially like the Indian culture as well, it's seen as taboo, or it's seen as something that's it's frowned upon, unfortunately. And we need to get rid of that, because at the end of the day, the world is evolving, everything is carrying on. We aren't living in the times that they have lived in. So we need to understand that these kids are facing different stresses, and they will experience some sort of difficulty in their life. So when they come through, they must be able to communicate. They shouldn't try to just push them away and say, hey, you know what, you're seeking attention, or find this silly excuse to justify that behavior. When a child is speaking or when they are acting, there's often a reason why they are acting to the specific in that specific way towards a specific thing. So that's the first thing. And in terms of recognizing it, so if you know your child, you'll then understand, you know what, my child is doing something that's different compared to their normal behavior, because we can't paint everyone with the same brush. So every child, as I said, would react differently. If your child is usually a very bubbly person, or outgoing and so forth, and then they eventually just keep quiet, they sitting in their room the entire day, extremely quiet and away from the world out there, aren't eating properly, going down in school, no list for anything, showing the depressive symptoms or whatever it might be. Your child will not always tell you that. You'll have to recognize it, and you'll only recognize it if you know it. So anything that deviates from your child's normal behavior, and along with the societal norms as well, we need to take that into consideration, in terms of their overall behavior. So if your child is in school, what's happening in school, maybe communicate with the teachers, have regular communication, ask the teacher, how is my child being performing? If your child is acting out in a certain way at home, and the child doesn't want to speak up or anything of that sort, ask the teacher, how is my child in school? How is he behaving? Whatever it might be. You also have to look at your own relationship in your home. Sometimes your home environment affects the way your child thinks, feels and behaves, because we are all human. The age doesn't simply define us, but we will respond to stimulus in a different way. And then if you feel, things aren't coming right, or things aren't going well, I think it's important for you to approach a psychologist. Depending on your child's age, you get different types of psychologists, and there's often a stigma that only clinical psychologists can see this child, or an educational psychologist can see that child, and a counseling psychologist can see another child. But it doesn't work that way. I think it's important for you to utilize the different avenues, whether it's an educational psychologist for a child, a counseling psychologist, whatever it might be. Don't shy away from those options. So you utilize them. They are there for a reason. They are trained in that specific field. And they all have different strengths that we complement each other. So I'd be referring people to an educational psychologist for certain assessments that need to be done on the child. And again, if a child is acting out in a certain way, we tend to brand them, with Facebook comment warriors and the Google experts, where we'll just Google something and we'll be like, oh, you know what? The child is now, they have ADHD. They really can't concentrate for a certain task. And then you're like, oh no, this child has ADHD. I urge parents and all the listeners to stop doing such a thing. Don't brand your child with something you don't know. As I said, if you have a problem with your hip, you're not going to go to a cardiologist. You'll first go to a physiotherapist. So you aren't, in a nutshell, you aren't equipped to actually make a diagnosis and brand your child, because if you look for something, you will definitely find it. So the professionals are there. Utilize them so that you actually do more benefit to your child and not more harm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we all have this problem of consulting Mufti Google or Professor Google for any advice. If we're sick, we feel a certain way, and we always go back to Google. And well, Google may have all the answers, but they don't have all the answers pertaining to that particular situation. All right, so Mohammed, shukran so much for your time and for sharing that information with us. And I hope that this segment will go a long way in helping people deal with things that they don't often talk about. Shukran and have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Mohammed Bhamjee, a psychologist, taking us through trauma and emotional healing. We will be discussing this in detail as we throughout the month, as a build-up. Something that I want us to understand, especially because women are supposed to be a certain way. Women are supposed to be strong. Women are supposed to be caregivers. The way society puts you on a pedestal is like you must be strong, but you must also be fragile at the same time. So it's like, what do you actually want me to be? So stop following societal norms and what society expects you to be, and be who you can be and who you are meant to be. And whether it's strong today, that's fine. Weak tomorrow, that's fine. Whether you're weak every day, that's also fine. But be yourself for yourself, and love the person that you are, because you don't know how tough and how strong you can actually be until you are put into a sticky situation. So you don't have to be that strong person every single day. But back on the trauma, we're going to be understanding the impacts of trauma, the impacts of healing, emotional healing, healing from traumatic experiences, etc. And if you have any suggestions, any comments, please send them to us. We would love to get in touch with you or the guests and get into depth with regards to this topic. So it is 12:56. To stay with us. We will be right back.